The author of Revenge, Alex Isenstadt, joins us now with more of these details. Alex, let's start with this decoy flight. Trump and his close advisors were so worried they secretly took an unmarked plane, but all the rest of the staff was buckled up and ready for takeoff on Trump Force One. Did they not know of the threat?
They had no idea until the doors of the plane closed and they were about to take off. In fact, many of them were surprised when Trump wasn't sitting in his seat, and some of them started asking questions. And that's when they found out that Trump would not be on the flight that day, that he would be taking his own separate flight. And so this was something that was that closely held. And what it illustrates is the level of fear and concern within the upper echelons of the Trump campaign and the Secret Service about Trump's safety. This all happened after that second assassination attempt in mid-September.
Yeah.
And so concerns were really intensifying at that point.
Well, campaign leaders apparently tried to reassure the staff on Trump Force One that they weren't being used as bait. The staff who was on that flight tell you it was surreal.
That's how they took it. And a lot of them didn't necessarily buy the idea that they weren't being used as bait, or rather it didn't do much to mollify them. They were still really taken aback by it. Some of them wondered why they didn't just end up flying commercial to where they needed to go. But from their standpoint, it was like, why are we being in this plane when there's concern that maybe it could be shot down by the Iranians?
Yeah, thanks. I think I would have liked to know before I got on the airplane. They called it the ghost flight?
That's right. That's right. It became, within campaign parlance, it became known as the ghost flight.
Listen, President Trump, as we're seeing almost every hour of every day of his second term, leads with bravado and swagger. And of course, there's that indelible image of him raising his fist, bloodied after being shot in Butler, Pennsylvania. But you say that he was far more rattled about these Iranian threats on his life than he ever let on publicly.
That's right. So there are two things here. One is that before the assassination attempts happened, he would talk regularly about how he ordered the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. That was something that was a very regular part of his stump speech. But people around Trump noticed that after these assassination attempts happened, that he talked about Soleimani a lot less. Second thing is that he started to worry about the political fallout of these assassination attempts.
What do you mean?
Specifically, he worried that voters would get tired, as he described it, assassination fatigue, which is, would people want to have a president who could be under threat for the next 4 years? Would they get tired of the idea of having a president who is constantly at risk of being assassinated?
Well, I can't even fathom that, but...
Yeah, and that people then would be less likely to vote for him in the November election.
Turns out that was a concern that he didn't need to worry about. Listen, last week Trump said he had actually given his team instructions. He volunteered this as he was doing another round of executive orders, that he had left instructions with his team to, quote, obliterate Iran if Iranian operatives were to kill him. Iran is still top of mind. He's still thinking about that. He sort of just volunteered this.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that he made that comment illustrates the extent to which he takes Iran seriously. He knows that Iran is after him. He's known that Iran has been wanting to kill him for years now, ever since he ordered the killing of Soleimani. But he also knows just how serious these threats last fall were.
Yeah, well, those Iranian fatwas are for life. They don't expire. It's not like,
right,
you know, kill them until this date. So good reason to be worried. All right, Alex Isenstadt, the book is Revenge. The inside story of Trump's return to power is out March 18th. Sounds like it's a good one. Congrats, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.